We're looking at a proposal titled Feeding Jesus' Sheep by Joseph Ng, arguing for a radical reversed cornucopia in evangelical church budgeting.
Yeah, moving billions from marketing to deep theological training.
It's a grenade thrown right into the middle of the modern church model.
So let's pull the pin.
Okay, right out of the gate, the manuscript risks immediate alienation of its primary audience. It characterizes stage one spending, the smoke machines, the rock concert lighting, solely as antics.
I stopped on that word too, antics. It feels so dismissive.
Completely. But let's look at the weakness here. The author's targeting what they call the attractional model.
Which is the megachurch standard, right? High production worship, slick videos.
Exactly. And he says this is costing 10 to 20% of the budget. That's what, $5 to $14 billion across the industry. He wants to slash it to 5%.
But if I'm a pastor of one of those churches, I'm not doing that for antics.
Of course not.
I'm doing it to get people in the door.
And that is the friction point. The text dismisses this whole approach as like frivolous entertainment without ever asking why they invest so much.
Yeah, so when you label it antics, the argument just invites a defensive shutdown. A pastor reads that and immediately thinks, you don't get my context.
If I cut the lights, the seats go empty.
And if the seats are empty, who am I supposed to be feeding in your stage 4? You can't feed a ghost town.
Right. The whole attractional argument is that you need a wide funnel.
You cast a massive net. That's the Christmas spectacular, the big events.
Then you clean the fish. This proposal basically says, stop buying nets, just buy better knives.
But you need the fish first.
So the suggestion has to be, you've got to change the approach. The author needs to steelman the attractional church's position before he tries to dismantle it.
Okay, so you have to acknowledge the intent behind the smoke machines.
Yes, it's about cultural relevance. It's about lowering the barrier to entry for someone who's, maybe never been to church. You grant them that premise.
But how do you do that without actually agreeing with them? I mean, the author clearly thinks it's a waste.
You move the argument from aesthetics to economics.
Okay.
So instead of just listing Christmas dinners and revival meetings as these, disparaging examples, you calculate the cost per convert versus the cost for mature leader.
Ooh, that's interesting. You turn it into an ROI discussion?
Precisely. You say, look, Pastor, you're spending $50,000 on marketing and production to get one new visitor who stays for 6 months. That's your acquisition cost.
Now compare that to spending $5,000 to train a mature leader who stays for 30 years and disciples 10 other people.
Exactly. You're not saying the lights are bad. You're just saying they're yielding diminishing returns.
That hits the finance committee where they live. It's not about style. It's about stewardship.
You can also frame it as a revolving door problem. Stage 1 draws the crowds, sure, but because Stage 4 is so underfunded, nobody sticks around.
I like that. So the critique of the CCLI licensing and media costs in the notes, it's not that they're waste.
Right.
You rephrase them as initialization costs that are cannibalizing the sustainment costs.
We're spending everything on the grand opening and we have nothing left for inventory.
It changes the tone from you're frivolous to you're mismanaging your operational overhead.
It respects the goal but questions the method.
Okay, so let's say you solve the smoke machine debate, then you run headfirst into a much bigger wall.
Oh, this is the third rail.
The Great Commission.
The proposal to reduce the evangelism and outreach budget to 5%. That creates a direct theological conflict with mission boards.
This is where I think the author gets shouted out of the room. I mean, the numbers are just stark. He wants to cut evangelism, outreach, marketing, and missions from maybe $14 billion down to, a fraction of that?
And in most evangelical circles, missions is the sacred cow.
It's the go ye therefore. If you say, I'm cutting the missions budget by 75%, you're not just making a financial choice.
You're making a theological statement that you don't care about the lost.
And
imagine the board meeting. The missions director is there. He supports 500 missionaries in the 140 window.
And you tell him, we're cutting your funding so we can buy expensive commentaries for guys who've been Christians for 20 years.
He's going to flip the table.
He's going to say, people are going to hell and you want to study Greek?
The link between feeding sheep from John 21 and evangelism is it's missing in the text right now.
So how do you bridge that? How can you possibly tell a mission board that cutting their budget is better for missions?
You have to argue that a well-funded Stage 4, this mature training, is actually the most efficient form of Stage 1 evangelism. You have to flip the whole logic.
Okay, walk me through that.
Right now, the church basically runs on a mercenary model.
A mercenary model.
Yeah, we hire professionals, pastors, missionaries, and we pay for marketing to bring people in. The person in the pew pays the bill. The professional does the work. It's expensive.
High overhead. Got it.
The reverse cornucopia model changes the workforce. You take that 55% of the budget and pour it into your mature believers.
The ones who can do that, intertextual connection thing, like with Melchizedek and Christ?
Exactly. You're not hiring mercenaries. You're building a guerrilla army.
Ah, I see. So instead of one paid guy preaching to 1,000, you have 500 equipped people who can explain the gospel deeply to their neighbors.
For free.
For free.
You have to use the multiplication argument. You tell the mission board, we are not cutting missions. We are decentralizing it to the pew.
The marketing department and putting it into the R&D of our people.
That's a compelling pivot. It turns the navel-gazing accusation into a strategic mobilization argument.
Yeah, you're not just studying Greek to be smart. You're studying it so you don't need a pastor to hold your hand when you talk to a skeptic.
It's the only way to survive that pushback. You have to prove that feeding sheep leads to better fishing for men. If you can't, this budget will never, ever happen.
Okay, let's assume the board buys it. They say, fine, here's your $30 billion. Go feed the sheep. What does that actually look like?
Right.
Because that's where I felt the proposal got a little fuzzy.
And that brings us to the third critique. The connection between this massive financial shift and the actual implementation of the middleware curriculum is currently too abstract.
Middleware. That's the term he uses for this? Like missing layer of education?
Yeah.
The text criticizes the painful academic seminary regime, Hebrew, Greek, systematics, says it's too inaccessible.
But it also criticizes the haphazard, loosey-goosey church syllabus.
The topical sermons, the wedding challenges, the fluff. It wants something in the middle.
But here's my problem. If I give you billions of dollars, something in the middle is not a line item.
No.
You can't just throw cash at Stage 4 and hope a curriculum appears out of thin air. And that's the weakness. It assumes financial reallocation equals educational outcome. It's missing the mechanics. If the money isn't going to seminaries and it's not going to the standard pulpit ministry, where does the cash actually go?
It feels like a huge risk of creating a slush fund. We've got all this money for maturity.
Great, let's buy nicer coffee for the Bible study.
Exactly.
So the suggestion here is to get explicit. Detail what the 55% mature sheep budget actually buys. We have to operationalize this middleware.
Give me some examples. If I'm the treasurer, what am I writing checks for?
Okay, let's get creative. What if you propose scholar-in-residence positions for local churches?
A scholar in residence?
Yeah, the author talks about deep dives into the canon. You can argue for staff who are specifically paid to teach that, not preach on Sundays, not visit the sick. Their sole job is to be the resident theologian for the lay people.
That is a radical shift. The teaching pastor is usually also the CEO and the counselor.
Splitting that role and funding a pure teacher, it's a concrete use of the money.
Okay, that's interesting. What else?
Fund the creation of the materials themselves. The text complains this curriculum doesn't exist. Well, with billions of dollars, you can commission it.
So you explicitly budget to develop a curriculum that bridges that gap between, like, Bible Institute and seminary.
Right. And what about the user experience? Feeding sounds so passive.
Yeah.
What if the budget funded sabbaticals for lay people?
Wait, what? Like paying a plumber to take time off to study the Bible?
Why not? If you have billions of dollars currently going to light shows and marketing agencies, why couldn't a church say, we'll pay for a 2-week leave for our mature members to study the book of Hebrews intensively?
Wow.
That is a concrete use of funds that shows you're serious about Stage 4.
That changes the entire value proposition of church membership. It's not just a place you volunteer, it's a place that actually invests in you.
And that investment angle leads us right to the final and maybe the most emotional critique.
Yeah, the author uses a very visceral phrase to describe the state of mature believers.
Milked to death.
Abused, to milk the sheep to death. It's a harsh image. It implies exploitation.
So the emotional core of this argument, that mature believers are being exploited,
It needs stronger evidentiary support to balance out all the financial estimates.
Right, because as I understand it, the logic is the stage 4 believers are the ones donating the bulk of that $50 to $70 billion. They're the financial engine.
Right.
But the church spends all that money on stage 1, on the new people. So the mature believer gives the milk, the church gives it to the babies, and the mature believer gets.
Nothing. That's the claim. But the weakness is that while the financial math is pretty solid, the milking claim relies entirely on anecdotal sentiment. It just sounds like a gripe.
To convince a skeptical board, the suffering of that mature believer has to be as vivid as the rock concert lighting.
Exactly. You can see the smoke machine, you can see the lasers. It's a lot harder to see the spiritual starvation of the guy in the third row who's been a Christian for 20 years and is bored out of his mind.
Or worse, he's not just sitting there.
He's working.
He's the burnt-out volunteer persona.
That's the concrete example. The person running the New Believer follow-up program, that's stage 3, is almost always the stage 4 sheep who is starving for meat, but only ever gets served milk.
They're the ones serving coffee, running the soundboard for the rock concert, parking the cars.
They are the labor force for the entire attractional model.
And the argument is, if you don't feed your labor force, eventually the labor force quits.
Yes, you have to highlight that imbalance. The mature believer pays for the smoke machines, but only gets random haphazard wedding challenges in return. It is a bad trade.
A bad business deal. I give you 10% of my income and 10 hours of my week, and you give me a sermon on how to be nice that I've heard 50 times.
If you frame it that way, you're not whining. You're presenting a retention strategy.
Ah.
The author needs to say, we are at risk of losing our core investors because we are neglecting them to chase new customers.
That is language a board understands. That's churn rate.
It grounds the emotional metaphor of milking in the hard reality of organizational health. You starve the sheep that produce the wool and the milk. Eventually, you have no farm.
So, pulling all this together, this isn't just a tweak to a spreadsheet.
No.
This is a fundamental restructuring of the entire evangelical industrial complex.
It is a massive disruption. The source presents a bold financial model reallocating, $12 to $32 billion, but a bold idea with a bad pitch is just a hallucination.
And to make this real, the author has a very steep hill to climb.
To make this viable, the author must first validate the attractional stage 1 investment before cutting it. Don't call it antics, calculate the ROI.
Second, he has to look the mission board in the eye and prove that feeding sheep actually leads to better fishing for men. Decentralize the Great Commission. Third, define exactly what that stage 4 budget buys. Don't just leave it as middleware. Give us scholar in residence programs, lay sabbaticals, commissioned curriculum, make the spend tangible. And finally, give a real voice to the milked sheep. Show the burnout. Frame the whole shift as a survival strategy for the church's most valuable assets.
It's a provocative proposal. It is dangerous. But if the author can refine this pitch to survive the board meeting, it might just change everything. Refine the argument and send it back to us.